The Canadian Immigration Channel introduces the owner-operator pathway of immigrating to Canada. Watch this short video to learn about the benefits of the owner-operator immigration. Immigrating to Canada as an owner-operator is a way of creating a workplace in Canada for yourself. First, you create your own Canadian company. In many cases, you don't even have to come to Canada to become a company owner. Set up a business bank account, register with Canadian tax authorities, create a website, and prepare the infrastructure for a successful start. Now it's time to apply for a work permit and come to Canada to start working in your own company. People working legally in Canada, including yourself, enjoy extra benefits in dozens of immigration programs. If you speak English or French, have experience in running a business or working as a freelancer, possess sufficient funds to start a new business, you meet the three principal requirements to start the immigration process to Canada as an owner-operator. Step 1. Create your own corporation in Canada without leaving home. Rest assured, our specialists will make this process comfortable for you. Step 2. Come and get employed from your very first day in Canada. Step 3. Now when you have a job in a Canadian company and the valuable Canadian work experience, choose one of many immigration programs available to apply for permanent residence. Canadian immigration system is changing. Don't wait until it is too late. Start now by sending an email to info@cictv.ca and our...
Hello my friends, and welcome to Canadian Immigration Channel Live. It's our next live session, next webinar, and today we will be talking about the proof of funds. Many of you were asking about it. Many of you were requesting us to have this communication specifically about proof of funds. So today we have the day, if you will, our webinar specifically dedicated to it. So we will be talking about money today and questions with perspective to the proof of funds, how to convince immigration authorities that we have enough money, how to deal with this, and so on. Of course, while your friends, counterparts are joining, just a quick reminder how it all would work. Well, our regular webinars, we are running them on a stable, regular basis every single month, right? You would see on the screen the link to join, the link to participate. We are, of course, welcoming your feedback and listening to you. So I sincerely invite you to contribute and participate. And if you would like our next webinars to be about a specific subject, about a specific topic, feel free to let us know. Again, we're listening to you, and it's our job in this sense, right, to reflect on what you're saying. We receive lots of emails with suggestions. I really appreciate to those of you who commented on the previous videos asking us for specific topics to talk to. Again, they are all taken into considerations, and we will be talking about them either in our videos or this way while we have this live sessions. Now, again, while we are waiting for your counterparts to join, I will very briefly go through the set of news which were coming in the recent days. Now, with respect to the major news, Express Entry is finally, knock, 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 of course, but finally working, right? There are two factors contributing to this. The major one is the renewed quota, and the quota of 401,000 people for the next year is reflected in the recent selections of Express Entry. And finally, the score went down to 469. I don't really want to say that the score fell to 469, right? The fallen score will probably be somewhere close to 450, 420. That would be really a dropout in a score. But as of now, the score went down to 469, and that's a significant milestone. It is specifically significant because that's the milestone which could be reached by a typical applicant 29 and under with master's degree, with 3 or more years of skilled experience, with CLB language of English. I'm not talking about French right now because many of you have heard that you are getting more points for French nowadays. With CLB 9 for your English, you will be getting 469. So again, This score is finally something attainable by you without participation of your spouse, without a job offer, without provincial nomination, without other factors such as a second language or brothers or sisters in Canada. And technically, congratulations to it all. It finally means that Canadian immigration is getting back on track after COVID. We're not out of complete woods yet with this COVID, but many of you might have heard that Canada is on the track to vaccination. Canada is finally on track to getting back to normal, or whatever you would call a new normality, but news are quite exciting. And of course, provinces are trying to catch up with this. Maybe you have heard, and we will be talking about it in recent videos, that Newfoundland and Labrador is planning to introduce a new immigration program starting January. Maybe you have heard that Saskatchewan is trying to catch up and give additional points for French. There will be additional points and additional changes in the program of New Brunswick. There are sessions of New Brunswick, virtual ones specifically dedicated to nurses, internationally trained nurses, and this session will be in December. So if you're looking to participate, mostly welcome. So despite the fact that we are going full steam ahead towards Christmas, immigration is working, and surprisingly for me, it works even better than I anticipated. In fact, it's an interesting story. Again, like while we are all gathering, right, and people are still joining up, I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about this news. We have actually 3 days ago, in fact, we recorded the video about prediction when we were sort of summarizing on the recent express entry selection, which took 5,000 people, and the score went down to 472. So we were kind of given projections, and in that video I said that, you know what, the next one should be either 469 or 470, provided that it would be within the reasonable time frame. And at that point I said that I would probably gamble on more that it would be 470 rather than 469, considering the statistics, considering the chances of federal authorities to conduct the next election express entry fairly soon. Well, here you go. I am mistaken. In fact, there is no reason to publish this video anymore, right? So this is one of those rarest occurrences when, in fact, our anticipation was quite, negative compared to what happened, and I'm really quite happy about it. Like, I'm looking at the recent months. This month, it hasn't ended yet. I mean, November, we got a number of clients who received an invitation to apply with federal authorities, those who received it with provinces, and in fact, it is such a strong moral support after all this mess with COVID, when lots and lots of points have stopped. Clients were going back and forth, struggling with immigration through provincial programs. So we're finally feeling that we are back on the successful track of immigration, and it's a huge relief. Those of you who are on track with immigration right now, my sincere congratulations. I mean, recent selections of express entry news with the provinces, they mean really a lot. Of course, Black Friday is coming, and I will be talking more about it today as well at the end of my presentation, right before we start talking and answering to your questions. But Black Friday deals are there, and of course, at the end of the talk today, I will mention how to get Black Friday deals, how to get Black Friday discounts if you're looking to have a consultation with us, or if you want us to work on your case. Now, with respect to our contacts, just in case somebody forgets it, right, we got two of them. So one of them is to participate in our live sessions. The other one, if you want us to assess your profile for immigration, that's cictv.ca/go, where you could click, leave your profile, leave your contacts, and one of our colleagues will be in direct contact with you and communication with you with respect to your future immigration. Now, before we move even further, your chat in here, let me just pop it up for 1 second. So if you'd like us to answer your questions, what I would do is during this session, while I'm talking, while you got slides on your screen, right, I would try to look at chat as much as humanly possible, right? But it's not always doable while I'm talking, at the same time trying to keep my eye on the chat, or we got assistants who are keeping an eye on that and will be trying to respond to you. especially if that relates to somewhat on the screen. Now, after we have this presentation, right, after the first part of this masterclass is over, we will have this sort of tete-a-tete session where I would be reading your questions right away, trying to answer them, trying to address them. And don't forget that, look, if somehow we have overlooked your question, feel free to ask it directly. Feel free to leave us a message, right? We're trying to address it as much as possible. Remember, all these webinars are designed and tailored for you, right? This live sessions right now, it's 9:40 p.m. in Toronto. And well, we are still in the office and we're doing it specifically for you to try to answer your questions, try to address your concerns. And I really, really appreciate your direct participation here today. Now, going forward with what we could do with this, right? If you're looking for our assistance and how we could support your case, right? We facilitate immigration learning, consulting. If you would need our direct support, feel free to send us a direct message and we will be more than glad to answer your questions as much as it's humanly possible, of course, right? Sometimes questions are quite vague, like, look, take me and immigrate me right away. But regardless, if you're looking for us to take charge of it, if you're looking for us to work together, we would be more than glad to help you out. Now, getting to the subject of communication today, getting to the direct topic, we're talking about the proof of funds. Way too many questions concerning proof of funds. There are lots of videos on the channel about proof of funds. People are coming literally every single day asking questions. So we thought that it might be worthwhile to actually address them and direct them one by one, how proof of funds works, what it is all about, and how to deal with the proof of funds. Now, first and foremost, right, when it comes down to the proof of funds, this is the amount of money which you would be bringing together with you to settle in Canada successfully. In our recent videos, maybe half a year ago, right, we were discussing how federal amount of money which is required could actually be used upon your arrival to Canada, and how in fact you could use them for 6 months to sustain your life in Canada, sustain it successfully, provided that you don't have a job, right? I really don't know what you have to do not to be able to find a job here for 6 months, right? I would probably raise a question for somebody who is not able to find a job for 4 months, but look, people are different, right? So the whole idea about this proof of funds is for you to sustain your life in Canada upon your arrival. There are exceptions, of course. And the major exception is Federal Skilled Worker Program, when you actually have a job offer, when you are supported by an employer with Labor Market Impact Assessment, LMIA, and in that case, if this employer is waiting for you, you do not necessarily have to demonstrate that you got enough money to live in Canada. Now, these exceptions might be sort of a 50-50, half and half solution, right? When, say, we're talking about pilot programs, and in case of pilot programs, the threshold of money you have to have is much lower compared to Federal Skilled Worker Program, right? But at the same time, it's not zero yet. And we will talk about it today as well, how much money is required and how to demonstrate them. Now, when it comes down to federal amount, right? This is the amount of money which is taken from LICO. That's low income cutoff. That's the minimum threshold which Stats Canada believe would be enough for you to sustain your life in Canada for 1 year. And this LICO is divided by 2 for you. So it's not for a year, it's for 6 months, right? And of course, this amount of money is adjusted every single year, right? The cost of living is rising everywhere in the world, right? So typically it's adjusted by $100, $200 every single year, and federal authorities are looking at it carefully. Why is it important? Well, because the new year is coming, and in 2021 the amount of money will be different. I mean, it's not going to be something significantly, drastically different, right? Right now, for one person immigrating through a Federal Skilled Worker Program, you have to have about 13,000 Canadian dollars, and for a family of 3 it should be somewhere close to $20,000, right? So it would be fair to expect that, you know, in 2021 the proof of funds which you would have to demonstrate for one person would be above $13,000, but again, not to the point of 13.5. Probably that's my prediction, but considering what's going on right now, I don't really see that there is a reason, you know, to significantly increase that threshold. How to show that amount of money? Well, in general, this money have to be available to you, right? So that's what immigration authorities have to see, that you would be able to liquidate this money, right? You would be able to take this money with you fairly easy. You have to demonstrate that this money are owned by you. And that's a problem with many applicants coming to me, right, and telling me that, you know what, yeah, I do have money. Okay, but you know what, it's in my uncle's account. Well, if it's in your uncle's account, you technically don't own this money. You might be in the best relationship with your uncle, maybe, right, for today. Tomorrow, your uncle might be very unhappy with you and just, tell you that, you know what, you will not have a dime out of my money because they're mine. They're in my account, right? And of course, they should be unencumbered. And this way, they should be free of debt or liability. So say, for example, if you got $100,000 in your account, but you are indebted of $50,000, you got a debt on your credit card, for example, of $50,000, never do that, by the way, right? You technically own 50,000 instead of 100, okay? So federal authorities have to see that the money which you have, right, are free of any debts, free of any liabilities or obligations, and you, in fact, are able to bring this money together with you in Canada. With respect to documentary proof, we're talking about the ideal circumstances, okay? So with respect to the ideal circumstances, you will have to demonstrate that you got an account and you have X amount of money in that account. There is an account number, there is the institution name, that's the name of your bank, there is this account balance, date, name of the holder, and account currency. However funny it may sound, but I see almost every single day, right, those proof of funds which are not actually reflecting either one of this, right? I'm not saying everything, but at least partially, it's lacking this, it's lacking that. It sometimes doesn't have a name of account holder. I'm not really sure how banks actually issue those letters without the name, but that happens, and that could be seen here and there from time to time. And just as an example of kind of documents, because they're different around the globe, it could be a bank statement, it could be a letter of bank reference, it could be your securities portfolio. And by the way, we will talk about securities today, right? It could be a deposit statement. So it could be a long-term deposit. When it comes down to long-term deposits, it's typically same bank account, right? I mean, it's still with a bank, and the bank just tells you that, you know what, if you withdraw it within the matter of like less than 5 years from now on, there will be penalties. But still, I mean, you are able to liquidate that amount of money, so it's perfectly fine to use the deposit statement. With securities portfolio, we will talk about that because I know many of you are, for example, working in Middle East and you got the pension fund which could be liquidated. I got clients who are working in United Nations, right, and they got securities funds which you could actually liquidate upon your leaving with the company, and that could be accepted as well with the proper explanation for officers. There are specific conditions and we have to talk about them, right, so that we understand and cover pretty much all of the options. When it comes down to express entry, right, you have to demonstrate that you got X amount of money, or tell federal officers that you got X amount of money, but you do not have to have them readily available right now. Upon creation of your profile, many somehow don't realize that upon creation of your express entry profile, you do not necessarily have to have that amount of money in your bank account, right? You have to tell officers how much money you have, and the threshold has to be bigger and larger than what is requested by federal government. Remember one of the first slides in here, but at the same time, you don't necessarily have to have it in your account right now. When it comes down to self-employed immigration, it's an interesting point, right? For self-employed immigration, there is no minimum threshold. We were talking about self-employed, right? When you're an artist, when you're a sportsman, when you're in creative arts, for example, and you're looking to immigrate through this self-employed initiative, you do not necessarily have to demonstrate X amount of money, but self-employed falls into business immigration category. And when it comes down to self-employed, you do not necessarily have to show that you got money, but you have to demonstrate your business plan. You have to demonstrate your intentions of creating a workplace for yourself in Canada. And in this regards, right, it's a different story. You have to show that, for example, if you're looking to open an arts gallery for yourself, right, you'd better have at least a couple $100,000, right? So it has to be reasonable with respect to what you're doing. If you're looking to work as a sports trainer, for example, right, in martial arts, well, you might demonstrate that, $5,000-6,000 would be more than sufficient for you to start your career. So it all differs depending on how it plays out for you and what's going on. But all in all, I mean, it's doable for self-employed immigration not to show money in your account. Again, really depends on particular circumstances. Well, I would skip for a P&Ps for now. I will talk about an owner-operator, and then we'll return back to provincial programs, because in regards to provincial programs, I wanted to talk about pilots as well. So just sort of incorporate it all together, despite the fact that pilots are typically fallen into federal government category. So with the owner-operator, there's no minimum threshold of how much money you have to have. Everything is pretty much determined by your business plan and what you're planning to do in Canada. Say you got experience in IT and you're looking to open an IT consulting company in Canada, right? An amount of money you might need would be somewhere equal to 10, 20, 30,000 Canadian dollars. You're looking to open a restaurant in Canada, right? And you got an idea how much money you need, especially in these difficult terms, right? You may be more than enough. You may have more than enough when you got, say, $50,000 in your account, right? You're looking to open a construction company and operate somewhere in Greater Toronto area. Well, you'd better demonstrate more than $1 million. Again, it all really depends on what you're planning to do, how to incorporate and explain it to provincial or rather federal officers in this regards in order to get yourself a work permit and come under an owner-operator stream. Owner-operator is, of course, a completely different business and a completely different set, if you will, but there is something to discuss in here. Now, again, like what I'm trying to do is just to keep an eye on the chat from time to time, but I promise that I would be able to return back to your questions when it comes down to question and answer section. And if needed, of course, we will be going forward and backwards on this slides today as well. As I said, it's all about you and answering your questions. Oh, sorry. I was going to talk about provincial programs, getting old and forgetful. Now, when it comes down to provinces, most of provincial programs, when it comes down to skilled migration, they're trying to shift their focus from own requirements towards the federal ones. So say Saskatchewan, for example, says that, you know what, the amount of money you have to have is equal to the one required by federal government. But they may have their own requirements with respect to the provenance of these funds and how you will be able to demonstrate it. So say Saskatchewan says that the amount of money you have should be in your account 90 days prior to the final submission of your documents. How to understand it? So say you calculate your points in Saskatchewan. You realize that, you know what, there is a solid chance for me to be selected by Saskatchewan. So 30 days prior to me creating a profile in Saskatchewan, I would put this money in my account because I will have this quarantine of 30 days. Now I create the profile and say if I'm selected tomorrow, I will have 60 days to submit my documents. Altogether, with this buffer of 30 days created before, I will have enough time to prove to Saskatchewan authorities that I got enough money. Interestingly enough, Saskatchewan was probably the first province which said that, you know what, we will actually accept securities portfolio. We will actually accept your trading account. If you're trading in shares, for example, somewhere on a market, but at the same time, Saskatchewan is adamant about the fact that throughout your application processing, you have to be able to keep that amount of money indefinitely all the time. In other words, if we process you for a year, and I'm exaggerating here, in fact, they're typically processing it faster, but say if we process you for a year, right, and you have to have 13,000 Canadian dollars in your account, well, you'd better keep it up and you'd better have this $13,000, not a dime less, for 1 year. And if you take, say, $10 from your account, and that's actually, unfortunately, not exaggeration, right, we will have the right to refuse your application, and probably we will. So keep an eye on what Saskatchewan requires. Now, some other provinces have their own requirements. Look at Manitoba, for example. That's $12,000 per person and $2,000 more per additional family member. That slightly differs from federal government requirement, especially when you extrapolate it to the number of family members in there. So for a family of 3, for example, federal government has the threshold of almost $20,000, and Manitoba in this case would be 16. But again, that's rather sort of an exclusion right now instead of the general rule. 5-6 years ago, provinces used to have their own requirement each. Nowadays, they are sort of trying to kind of, standardize it for federal government requirements as well. And when it comes to pilots, look, it really depends on what kind of immigration pilot you're going through. For example, for Atlantic pilot, for one person, you have to have about 3,000 Canadian dollars, and for a family of 3, that would be $5,000. For the rural pilot, which in many ways copies Atlantic pilot, I don't really understand why, but the requirement is about 9,000 Canadian dollars per person, for one individual, and for a family of 3, that would be 13,000 Canadian, right? Which is still lower than the requirement of federal government, but still, I mean, significantly higher than, for example, Atlantic. And I'm not really sure how they came up to this amount of money. Probably were just, extrapolating the cost of living in rural and northern territories, which in my personal opinion is still cheaper than living in Atlantic. But anyways, right? So just keep an eye on specifics and specific requirements of provinces and pilots. Now, with respect to the proof of funds, it is perfectly fine to pull those proof of funds from different sources. I got this question over and over again for videos, people coming for individual consultation. Is it fine that 90% of money are in my spouse account, right? Is it fine if 100% of what we have, right, is in my wife's account? Is it fine if I got $10 here, $10 here, and in fact, I got a million different accounts, including trade-in ones, right, deposits, shares, and so on? Yes, it is perfectly fine as long as you have documentary proof that this accounts belong to you as a family. So in other words, pulling out accounts of yours and your spouses, pulling out different accounts is perfectly fine. What is not fine is showing cash. You have no idea how many times in my life I've seen pictures of cash. Jokes aside, seriously, people were kind of adamant that, if they take a picture of cash on a sofa, right, them sitting with the cash, that would work as a solid proof of funds for federal officers. I do understand that it might not be that funny considering difficult circumstances in different countries, right? Take, for example, what's happening in Lebanon, right? Take, for example, countries close to Eastern Europe, right? And you name it, right? Like look at some countries in Africa, which are struggling right now with this COVID, which were struggling financially before. And there are severe limitations with respect to people going for bank, right? Opening their bank account, how much money they could withdraw from their bank. And I understand people who get scared, right? And saying, you know what, we're not ready to deposit this amount of money to our bank right now. So we were way better and way safer keeping this money in cash. Yes, it's fine to keep those money in cash and deposit them at the very last moment and explain it to federal officers, but it unfortunately is not fine to take a picture of cash. Okay, so money should be deposited. Unfortunately, right, it's sometimes fine to go to the nearest country and deposit money in there as long as you are able to travel. There are specific circumstances for different cases, but it's doable for all the countries in the world, right? And of course, you have to provide an explanation why that happens, right? This explanation has to be comprehensive, how this money were accumulated. For example, like, look, I've been making $2,000 per month at work, $1,000, right? I've been working for 10 years, I accumulated this amount of money, my spouse has been working, and so on, right? If you would need detailed explanation on how to do this, welcome to individual consultation. We would look deeper into this, but I hope that it would give you a general idea how to do with this. With respect to securities portfolio, I think about the first point in here, that this portfolio is volatile. So you got to be very, very careful, especially when it comes down to stringent requirements of provinces such as Saskatchewan. As I said, on one point, this guy is saying, look, it's perfectly fine to show us your securities portfolio. You own shares of Microsoft, great, right? You're following Warren Buffett, wonderful, right? But if your securities portfolio altogether, right, the value of your portfolio actually falls down below the threshold required by us, unfortunately, we will refuse your application. How fair is that? Well, my personal opinion, it's not fair. So keep an eye on your portfolio and what you're doing in it, right? I will usually recommend that, if you got a comprehensive portfolio, and say for a family of 3, you got X amount of money in your account, right? Get $20,000 out of it, right? Put it in the most secured assets you could imagine, right? Gold or whatever stable currency you could imagine, right? Put it in there so that at least you sleep well with respect to proof of funds for provincial authorities, right? Everything else, yep, work with this. Take a snapshot of it upon submission of your application. That's really important, and keep it with you as a proof that at the time of your submission you had enough amount of money, and make sure, that you would be making more. In fact, we're preparing a presentation for many of you just to show how you could play out with the securities portfolio and testing it on us right now, right? While being in any other country in the world, and what you could do with this and how you could actually use this securities portfolio for the future. It will take time because, as I said, we want to test it out on ourselves to demonstrate it to you and show you what could be done with this. But all in all, securities would work perfectly fine. So especially in these days, if you want to make sure that you will be able to benefit from it, feel free to do that and use securities. Now, donated funds. That's an interesting story for many Eastern Asian countries. That's a story which pops up here and there pretty much all over the world nowadays, right? It used to be traditionally a prerogative of Eastern Asian countries, where funds are, say, in an account of the senior family member, right, who holds those money in his or her account and distributes them willingly, despite the fact that you might be in your 30s, in your late 20s, or whatsoever, right? Your mom or dad might still be in charge of the major chunk of money which you have, which is still, perfectly fine. It's cultural differences, but regardless, right, you have to demonstrate that this money, if they were transferred from your relatives, they are transferred to you without the expectation that they would be paid back. This is typically called a deed of gift, donation, gift, whatever you donation deed, whatever you call it. And in your chat history, you would see this link where you could get a sample of a document to be used, to be notarized in your home country. So in other words, how to use this document and what it represents, it actually represents a piece of paper notarized, so it has to be attested with the local notary public. You have to go to a local notary, a local law office, whoever gives that amount of money. Say it's your dad, your uncle decides to be generous enough to give you $10,000 for your immigration, right? This person has to go to a notary public and prepare a letter. You could actually use the sample letter, which we will share in this presentation, and you would see the link to it, as I said, in your chat. And the point here is that, look, I'm given this amount of money, I'm depositing this money to my nephew, my niece, right? I'm giving it to my son or daughter, and I'm not expecting to be repaid in any other form. It doesn't say that, I'm expecting them to come back to come to Canada, right, earn X amount of money, and within 10 years they will pay me back. That shouldn't say so. It definitely should say that we're not expecting anything in return. And of course, there should be explanation from your side as well, right? Like where this money are coming from, how come this money are not in your account, why your dad, your uncle, whatever your friend, you name it, is generous enough to give this money to you. If you're selling a property, that's perfectly fine as well. And when it comes down to property sale, that could happen at the very last moment. Remember in the slide when we explained federal government, right, or express entry rather, we were talking about provinces, owner operator, we were talking about self-employed. I mentioned specifically when it comes down to express entry, you do not necessarily have to have X amount of money in your account. You can actually even make a mistake and claim, say, I got $50,000, and later on you could demonstrate that you got 30. that's still perfectly fine as long as that's above or equal to the threshold required by federal government. Right now, say you received an invitation to apply, you got 60 days to prepare your final submission, you got your documents, and you have to work on your application for permanent residency now, because now it's extremely serious. Now that is your day D, if you will. Now you have to work your butts out to make sure that everything you do is polished to perfection. Say you do not have enough money and you're looking to liquidate one of your properties, you're looking to sell the apartment you live in, right? You're looking to sell your investment property, whatever it is. Make sure that you would prepare all the documents. Maybe in where you live, it might be culturally appropriate for you to sell it for cash. That's perfectly fine, but you still have to have this sales agreement demonstrating what you've been selling, right? And what is the amount of money in local currency, in whatever currency you are selling it. So it has to be stated there. Now, all this amount of money has to be deposited into your account. It is, of course, okay to deposit it partially, but I would strongly recommend you to at least demonstrate to officers who say your apartment was sold for $1 million of local money, right? You deposited everything in there, and if needed, you deducted whatever part is required. But all in all, this money came to your account. So there's this direct connection between sale and the amount of money which came to your account. And of course, you have to provide an explanation, despite the fact that it might be obvious for you and you attach the agreement of sale with your application. Don't expect officers to read it, understand it, process it in their head automatically and say, that's what it is. Nope. You have to explain it in a cover letter perfectly from A to Z, what it is all about. Typically, it's one cover letter for application where you mention everything with respect to proof of funds. Look, we were not depositing this money because the economy in our home country is not stable, but we were, accumulating this money in the form of cash, and now we're depositing them at the very last second. Apart from that, right, we sold my wife's apartment, right? And this apartment was sold for this amount of money. We sold it. This is the agreement of sale. We're actually attaching it together with the certified translation to our application. And this is the amount of money we're depositing in the account. So that would be the perfect explanation to officers for the proof of funds here. Now, very quickly, I would just run through asked questions, the typical asked questions before we go forward and discuss your particular questions, and I would go forward and plunge deeper into answering your concerns and addressing your concerns. So currency exchange rates. There are typically officers would be able to deal with the currency exchange by themselves, so you don't have to explain it further. Okay, try to avoid circumstances where people are coming to certified translators and saying, you know what, look, do me a favor, convert Brazilian reals to Canadian dollars. You know what, do me a favor, convert Indian rupees to Canadian dollars or US dollars, and so on, right? Translators are not legally allowed to do that in the first place, and you have to make sure that, either you don't provide currency conversion, expecting officers to do it on your behalf, and that's a good idea to do that if you got significantly more money than required by federal government. If you are sort of on the edge and on the threshold, what you could do, you just could Google the Bank of Canada exchange rates, go to their calculator on the date of your submission, take the snapshot of that calculation, which shows that, say, $1 million in my local currency is equivalent to, say, $100,000 in Canadian dollars, right? So you take that snapshot and you attach it together with the explanation to officers, like, dear officers, that's what I'm doing, right? I took this calculation, I took it from the Bank of Canada, right? This is the snapshot of their website. You're able to verify this information if needed because historical data is stored in there. But that would explain to officers how come you got this amount of money. Now, this, of course, has to be verifiable. And is it possible that officers would actually dial the bank and verify this? In the first place, we got to understand that officers are not able to check how much money you got in your account, right? Typically, that's private information. Banks in most of the countries in the world I'm aware of will not be able to disclose it. But what officers could do, they could pick up the phone, dial the bank, and speak to the bank teller, bank manager, you name it, and ask them if the letter which bank has submitted is correct, if the letter which the bank has provided is actually accurate, and this amount of money is in fact or was in fact in the possession by the time this letter was issued. And believe me, if that was a case where some, unscrupulous individuals were trying to Photoshop this bank statement. Well, in this regards, what could have happened, right? Bank teller would say, well, it's not. Well, and all the best explaining yourself. Try not to get a ban for 5 years for misrepresentation. Now, with the proof of validity date, financial documents have to be valid, and typically I would recommend them to be fresh enough, say within the last 30 days upon your submission. And when it comes down to serious amounts of money being deposited and dropped in your account, well, seriousness would probably constitute something around like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 submitted in chunks in the last couple of months in your account. That has to be explained. Okay, make sure that you will spend a couple of minutes explaining it to officers in your cover letter. Like you could see from the bank statement, from the recent transactions history, that in fact, like X amount of money was deposited into my account, and they were deposited in large chunks, right? These are the transactions from my uncle, from my aunt, whoever, and I'm here with attaching the deed of gift from them. That would be the great explanation. And statement period, what officers would love to see from your account, that is 6 months. That is the period officers are looking for. Everything falling beyond that 6 months, within 6.5 months, 6 months and 1 day, 7 months and so on, is not a matter of interest for them. They will not be looking further into it. Now, with respect to Black Fridays, just very, very quickly before we switch forward and discuss the matter of your questions and go about it, right? Black Friday is coming. It's namely tomorrow. So if you're looking for Black Friday deals, if you want to use your chance and, have a consultation with us, talk to us directly to have your concerns answered and addressed. If you would like us to take your case forward, whatever you name it, right? Mostly welcome. Drop us a line, send us an email. Make sure that you put Black Friday in the subject of the email, and we will be able to help you out, look at your profile. Believe me, discounts, these perks, these solutions, this additional support is huge, and discounts are typically above 50%. So, well, trying to comply with the Black Friday as much as possible and, give you an additional tool to make Canada closer to you. Considering the fact that, we're looking at the circumstances with the express entry scores going down, with provincial programs introducing additional points. Well, that's a lot. In fact, well, of course, hold on for a second. Your feedback is mostly welcomed, right? Sharing is appreciated. We're not wrapping up in here. Don't take me wrong. As I said, I would be able to address your questions and answers right now, but just repeating what I said in the beginning. All these live sessions, they are for you. They're designed and tailored by you in a sense where you're asking questions and you're giving us an idea of what to talk next. Now, our next subject on December 22nd, right before Christmas, we will be talking about immigration fraud, right? What it is, how to deal with this, how to avoid, of course, immigration fraud. And we have multiple examples of what's going on right now. Remember, we got this fraud check on the website where you could submit documents received no matter from where, right? And we verify whether or not these documents are genuine. We got a team dialing employers. We got a team checking out whether or not it's true. And 99% of what we receive is fraud with a capital F. So we will be talking about on December 22nd, mark your calendar, and on December 22nd, we will be communicating about that immigration fraud. Now, before we move forward, what we would do, I would take a short intermission before answering your questions. That would be about this immigration fraud as well and how to avoid it. And then I will come back to you and would start talking to you and addressing your questions, answering them, talking about your own situations, and would try to answer your questions as much as possible.
There is a huge black market of fake immigration services offered by scammers in all countries of the world. Thousands of victims being defrauded every day, facing consequences from lost money and invalidated passports, to being banned from Canada for life. Numerous fake job offers and employment contracts, job approval letters, are being sold to people because securing employment in Canada creates direct pathway to successful immigration. Every single day, Free Fraud Prevention Service ran by the Canadian Immigration Channel receives dozens of fake employment papers for verification. LMIA is the official document issued by the Government of Canada to an employer authorizing them to hire workers from abroad. If you are asked to pay for it, contact the Fraud Prevention Service immediately. Creativity of scammers is virtually endless. They fake documents used in the actual immigration process, and in addition to that, they invent the whole range of other papers to further confuse and deceive their victims. Be extra careful when you receive a visa from an untrusted agent. Trying to enter Canada with a fake visa will result in immediate departure, and you will be banned from Canada for years. Virtually any document can be faked by scammers, even a document you've never thought existed. The Canadian Immigration Channel runs free fraud prevention service that is efficient and easy to use. Just send any document that looks suspicious to info@cictv.ca, and our specialists will examine it and respond with a verdict about its genuineness.
All right, now you should be able to hear me, you should be able to see me sort of wider on a screen, and I would start reading your questions and would try to address your questions one by one as much as possible in here. Is there a chance of getting permanent residency? Yes and no, depends on the circumstances. You've done mechanical engineer and now you're teaching as an assistant professor in a college. Look, this is the typical misconception, and I'm not really sure where it comes from, because I heard that a few people telling me that it's probably coming from Australia. Don't catch me up in here. That's what I heard, that in Australia you have to have your diploma and your area of specialization, so your work experience matching each other. I'm not sure if it's true, but lots of people were telling me that that's the case, and that's where questions with respect to Canada are coming from. No, that doesn't work this way in Canada. You have this sort of pillars, if you will, of immigration. So one of these pillars is that, yes, indeed, you have to have your education, and this education has to be assessed. So you have to have education credentials assessment. You have to make sure that you got your language test result, right? These two have to be there. You got your age and you got your work experience. So these four pillars are the foundation of your immigration. But work experience and your education, they should not necessarily go together. Your work experience and language abilities or age, they should not necessarily be in conjunction with each other. So these are separate requirements. They all have to be met, but each one separately. So if you're teaching, or you were, say, studying to be a mechanical engineer but ended up in your career being a teaching assistant or a teacher, that's perfectly fine. There is nothing wrong with this, and you might have chances for your immigration. I would invite you, if you'd like to speak directly, and if you want an individual consultation, mostly welcome. We will talk, we will see how it actually works for you. But the fact alone that you are a teacher and then you got different educational background has nothing to do with this. Hello, how many points is the spouse undergraduate degree is worth? I guess the question is about express entry, but again, well, depends on what you imply by undergraduate degree. So for example, if your spouse has 3 years of education, right, 3 years of post-secondary education, that would be 8 points. Have to have a look at the profile to answer that question. But by the way, we have a free express entry calculator on our website. You could go there and you could just play out with this. It would be much faster than using the one provided by federal government. So you don't have to enter your data all the time, every single time, just to play it out and look and simulate different scenarios. So if you want to use it, it's on our website. It's free of charge to use. There is no obligation. You don't have to register for anything, and it would give you an idea of different scenarios for your spouse. You have an active express entry profile, and you are applied for Saskatchewan provincial nominee program. Do you think there is a chance to get an invitation to apply from the province? Now, here is an answer to this. First and foremost, okay, you haven't applied, okay? You have expressed your interest, and that's the misconception. We'll talk about it in a second. But say if you got 65 points, and right now with the introduction of additional points given for French by Saskatchewan, I would say that it would be fair to expect somewhere close to 68, 65 right now. I mean, speaking about 2020, probably is not that realistic. Okay, we'll see what will happen in 2021, because Saskatchewan will have to cope up with the fact that express entry scores will be going down step by step, not dropping, but going down one by one, which should in fact stimulate the province to ease their requirements for new applicants. Otherwise, these people would never go to Saskatchewan, right? Like, I mean, face it, who in the sober mind wants to live in Saskatchewan? There's not that bad in there, but in fact, if you got a choice, you would probably go to Toronto or Vancouver. Most of you, of course, right? So what happens is, if provinces feel that, they're losing this grip of the number of applicants, there's not too many applicants who are expressing their interest and submitting their expression of interest through Saskatchewan Oasis, Saskatchewan will have to lower down their requirement and reconsider their threshold. So in that sense, 65 might be valuable. But again, depends on circumstances, and maybe it would be a good idea to have a consultation, an individual talk where we would see what else could be done. Now, I wanted to address one important concern in here. When you're saying that you applied for Saskatchewan, remember I said you expressed your interest, but you haven't applied. That's a different story. Why is it important? Because I hear it more often than not when people are saying, you know what, look, I'm not really sure if I could apply at the same time for Saskatchewan and create the profile for Prince Edward Island, right? Or express my interest, or rather they typically using the term apply for Nova Scotia, or you name it, right? Now, that is not an application. That is an expression of interest. And you're sort of, shopping around trying to browse for the best solution for you, okay? And in this regards, you're absolutely free to do so. You're absolutely free to express your interest in going for Saskatchewan, for PEI, for whatever province you would like to, okay? There's nothing wrong with this. What comes down to wrong action is when you are in fact invited by Saskatchewan. So say you get 70 points right now, okay? And Saskatchewan tells you, all right, Mr. I'm sorry, I lost you, maybe Hammond, sorry if I don't pronounce it right. So Mr. Hammond, you got 70 points. Welcome to Saskatchewan. Would you accept our invitation? And you're saying, yeah, of course I am, right? You're nodding your head, right? At that point, if you got an invitation from New Brunswick, you gotta refuse it or refuse the one with Saskatchewan. You can't go for both. That would be application for two programs, and that is punishable. But as long as you're just expressing your interest, it's perfectly fine. Can you please explain what type of proof of funds is needed for temporary resident visa? Now, with respect to temporary resident visa, despite the fact that temporary resident visas are mostly closed right now, unless of course you got compelling circumstances explaining why you want to visit Canada and you got relatives in here, for example, right? You can't travel right now, but hopefully this would be lifted soon. Now, speaking about the circumstances around a temporary visa, you have to demonstrate that you got enough funds to live in Canada, and these are not your lost money. So say you got $5,000 in your account and you're coming to Canada for a couple of days, which will probably cost you around, I don't know, considering the hotel cost, right, accommodation and food and entertainment will probably cost you $500, right, depending on entertainment, for example. Or if you're planning to visit a casino, right, that would be a couple $1,000s. But these are not your lost money, and you're making a substantial amount of money. You could demonstrate it by your salary, by your references. That would be perfectly fine. What is not fine is saying that, you know what, I'm planning to go to Canada for 2-3 months and I got $6,000 in my account. Question is, like, why would you be spending most of your life savings traveling around the globe, right, and coming to Canada and in the first place to visit Niagara Falls, right? It doesn't make any sense. So this reasonability factor is typically taken into consideration. So officers look at your bank account overall, and again, like, look, if somebody tells you that, you know, for you to sustain your living in Canada for 2 weeks, you may need, $500, right? It doesn't mean that you have to have $500 in your account. Show as much as possible. And additionally to that, demonstrate how much you're making, right? Because officers would see reasonability, like, I mean, how reasonable it is for you to travel in this sense and incur these expenses when you're going to Canada, and what are your chances of returning back. I hope it would help you to, so some sort of get a vector, an idea where to dig to. We actually have a video on our channel where we explain the rough idea of expenses of a person traveling to Canada. I think it's a year old, but all in all, this video is still valid, well, with the approximation of what's going on right now. Okay, so my husband and I, teachers, both have a degree. You're looking to go to Canada. You're scared of being neglected in express entry. I'm not really sure. I'm sorry, what is scared of being neglected in express entry actually means, but okay. So you were you were going to study in Canada. Okay, well, I mean, it's one of the ways to build your immigration, and I think in our one of our recent videos and our live sessions, we were explaining it as a multiple stage approach. What I would probably say, you're comparing two options on the table, because express entry by itself, I mean, until recent day when the threshold went down to 469, wasn't even an option, right? Because you're not able to pass unless you have something on top of that, unless you have an employment invitation, unless you have provincial nomination, right? Unless you speak French as well, unless you got a spouse whose language abilities are quite high, right? So if you don't have it, express entry, as you know, as a clean, pure way of approaching it, is not entirely for you. But what you could compare is express entry and provincial nomination, if there is a province ready to take me, if my score with my spouse might be sufficient enough, versus going for study. What are the odds that my study visa would be refused versus what are the odds of getting provincial nomination? It's very difficult to look at the profile just based on, you know, a couple of words, if you will, in here in chat, but that's at least to give you an idea where to dig to and where to go to in assessing your profile. And again, if you want to have a discussion one-on-one, feel free, drop us a line. We'll be more than glad to assist you. Okay, you're married, and again, sorry if I don't pronounce your name incorrectly, Adibuli. So you're married, you're 40 years old, planning to pursue your graduate diploma. Is it advisable for you to use your uncle account as a proof of fund? Well, I mean, like, you're 40 years old. What are the odds that your uncle is ready to part with his money and spare them on paying for your tuition? I would rather say it's a good idea while you're planning your studies to make sure that money from your uncle's account are deposited to yours prior to you making your application. Otherwise, it would actually make an officer scratch his head, like the same way it makes me scratch mine right now. It just doesn't really make much of a sense at this point. Hi, I'm Rodrigo. Hi, Rodrigo. My spouse doesn't speak English. Can we apply as a family? Yes, absolutely. As long as you got enough points to immigrate, you can immigrate together. Typically, immigration for most of programs in Canada, it's built on a premise that there is one person driving this immigration forward, and the second adult applicant may actually give additional points or not give these points, right? In fact, in express entry, even deduct some. But again, like, if you got enough score to pass, yeah, absolutely, take your spouse with you. I mean, it would be unjust and unfair not to take her with you. Can you apply for the job before you get a visa? You need to have a visa to apply. No, I mean, you could try to apply, and we've explained multiple times, but at the same time, what are the odds, especially right now during COVID, that employers will be sponsoring you, unless these are the employers from specific dedicated areas, when we spoke about Atlantic and rural, right, areas where employers are given this privilege to actually employ foreign workers without labor market impact assessment application. If that makes sense for you. If not, again, feel free to come. We'll talk individually and see what could be done in your case. For express entry, do I need to start the process? Okay, that's a good question, and sorry if I'm not able to, my eyesight is not that good, I'm not able to read your name in here. For express entry, do you need $13,000 for one applicant, right, to start the process, or before ITA or after ITA? Okay, now you need that amount of money after invitation to apply. So in express entry, you will have a question of how much money you have, right? So how much money you actually have for your application. That's this question will be there. But answering this question, remember in previous slides, I said it's totally fine even if you make a mistake, right? As long as the amount of money which you have will still meet the threshold, right? So you could brag and say, I got $1 million, and in fact you don't have it. All you have is $13,000. It would not negatively impact your application. What happens in here is when you got invitation to apply, you have to pile up the documents. You have to provide the proof of funds, police clearances, you have to undergo medical examination, and so on and so on, right? So now when it comes down to the proof of funds, you have to demonstrate that you got an amount of money in your account, and you have to show that provenance of funds, this transaction history for the last 6 months. If this transaction history shows that the money were deposited quite recently, that's where you have to elaborate. That's where this deed of gift starts to play, right? Like, look, they were deposited to me and given to me by my father, and this is the deed of gift by my father, and I'm explaining it to you, dear officers. That works perfectly fine. International student with study permit approved is allowed to enter Canada in company of his family using electronic travel authorization. Well, it's kind of, a side note question, but since I read it, I will still address it. Roberto. Now, if there is no indefinite right for you to enter Canada, it will be decided on the border by a particular officer. But if your academic institution is ready to take you and invite you here, okay, that's important considering this situation with COVID. But if your academic institution, your university or college says, yes, we have this, quarantine plan, we have this plan to address the circumstances with COVID, and we're welcoming international students, you're able to travel. Now, for your spouse with ETA, right, it might not necessarily be the case because of COVID. So I would say we have to look deeper into your particular circumstance, where you're going to address this question, to be honest. Because the fact that she might have ETA is not sufficient enough for her to travel yet. Okay, considering, of course, the situation with this pandemic. Hopefully it would be resolved soon. In fact, there are very good signs that it's coming. As I said, we do have very, very good plans right now, preliminary ones, but they are solidifying day by day with dealing with COVID, dealing with vaccinations. Vaccines are finally coming to Canada. It's more or less adamant now, and that's a good news for you. Well, at one point, people were asking me, like, what does it have to do with me? I'm outside of Canada. That relates to you because that's your chance for the borders to be open. That the more vaccination comes, right, the further we go in here, right, the lower this threshold in express entry will be, because more officers are getting back to work, right? More officers are allowed to process your applications. Selections are getting back on a more or less regular basis, and that, of course, drives the score to go lower and lower, and that opens the doors for you. The reason I'm so excited, because as I said, like, look, till pretty much the midst of November, that was a terrible month, right? While the numbers of COVID were going up and climbing up, there were no positive news. We all were on the verge of closure, and now suddenly, pum, right? We got this news about vaccines. We got this news about express entry. We got new provincial programs rolling out. We got invitations for clients. And look, if we forget about it for a second, and if I close my eyes right now, I would probably say that this is more or less a normal month, considering the number of applicants who got ETA right now, and we got the majority of the team, in fact, working right now on existing clients' final submissions, rather than trying to stick their applications to one or another provincial program like it was a month or 2 months before, which is great. Now, we are pretty much at the point where we have to wrap up, because we've been an hour together. I really sincerely appreciate you all coming in, because I know it's time difference and time zone difference, right? It's 10:30 p.m. in Toronto right now. Well, we got to wrap it up, get home, and prepare to go to bed. We still got Friday to work. But regardless, I really sincerely appreciate you coming in. I'm always feeling terrible when I'm not able to answer all the questions you were asking in chat. So again, feel free to answer them directly. And let me get back to here for a second. Now, these are the contacts. If you would like us to speak to you directly, if you want us to assess your chances for immigration, that's the first link, cactv.ca/go. That's where we are. Get there. Enter your information. We will be in direct contact with you for the upcoming live session, cactv.ca/live, and we will be there. Next time we will be talking about immigration fraud. And again, guys, look, if we're not able to answer your questions, if I somehow missed your question, feel free to send an email. I would be more than glad to talk to you directly if needed. And see you in Canada, I hope. Stay tuned with us, subscribe for the channel, and stay safe.